Pod Podcast. I'm your host, Super Joe Pardo, and I have a really exciting guest for all of you indie podcasters out there this week. I'm super excited to be able to bring on a good friend of mine, and we are going to talk about a topic that is both near and dear to his heart as well as mine. The topic is, of course, that you have to ask. You have to ask. You have to do the work and make it happen. And it starts by asking. Anyway, before we jump into that, I just want to remind everyone that on May 16th, we are doing another virtual conference. It is building your community building for podcasting. I'm super excited to get that rolling here. Facebook user Oh Wow says, "Oh wow, I shared the room with Max at Podfest. He was amazing. He is amazing. He inspired." Oh wait, I'm not supposed to say the name yet. You're screwing me up there, Facebook user. The beard, it is still present. I have showered though since Monday. Brent, I promise I've showered. I've absolutely had to because I've been doing a lot of work around the house. But you gotta go to StreamYard.com/Facebook so we can see your beautiful beard up on the screen, like everybody else. So this guy inspires me. I've known him for quite a few years now. It's been an amazing journey for himself, for myself, and to be able to talk with him every single week. I'm excited to get to bring him to you to talk about. All you have to do is ask. Before I get there, this episode is brought to you by Podbean. Podbean is an easy and powerful way to start podcasting. We give you all the tools you need for a successful. They give you all the tools. I don't give you the tools. I give you the tools to try to help you learn. They give you all the tools you need for a successful podcast, such as unlimited podcast hosting, podcast distribution, monetization options for podcasts of any size, and live stream podcasting capabilities. Sign up today at www.podbean.com. That's PODBEAN.com. So I'm really psyched to be able to, yes, thanks, Brent. StreamYard.com/Facebook to show your wonderful profile picture and name. Michael Kroos is in the house as well. What's going on, Michael? It's good to see you here. Matt, our guest is truly changed the way he thinks. He's changed the way I think. He has changed the way that so many people that I've gotten to meet and know and have gotten to meet and know him changed the way they think. And he constantly challenges me to push myself harder. Everybody, I need you to give it up for the blind blogger himself, Maxwell Ivey. Woo! Welcome, Max. How the heck are you doing tonight, man?
Well, I'm doing really good. I appreciate that welcome and that great introduction. And I'm very jealous because I only record my stuff live. I don't actually broadcast it live. And there's absolutely no way I could see myself reading and responding to people on social media while I'm trying to do my podcast. So I'm very impressed, very jealous.
Well, thank you.
and no, you have not inspired me to try it myself. That's one of those things that I'm just not going to do.
Well, we talked about it. You can do it. You absolutely can do live streaming. We just need we need to get you somebody who can help produce this show for you. Or
right. I mean, and why don't we kick off the show in the way we intend to go forward? If there's somebody in the room that wants to be the producer for the Blind Bloggers What's Your Excuse show when it goes live, we got a home for you. We don't have no cash for you, but we can give you props, promote you on social media. And hey, there's a phrase some people have used when they've met me and worked with me. They're like, Max, I love working with you because people are starting to say, if he did that for Max, what could he do for me? So there is definitely value in collaborating and helping out the blind blogger and What's Your Excuse. So if we have somebody in the house that wants to produce, theblindblogger.net, there's a contact form over there. Get in touch with me.
Yes. All they have to do is, as Brent just wrote below, ask. And Brent Basham also says, Max in the house. Of course he is. I'm super pumped to have him here. Max, I think that anybody let me tell let me spin a little story. That you had people come, like, so you traveled from Houston, Texas to South Jersey, and for the first time back in 2017, I believe, was that when we did
Yes,
the
was
DreamCon,
May
the
of
first DreamCon.
2017, a book to be released any day now. Yes, that was my first trip. And, I really had no idea how big a deal that was until I'm standing there or sitting there after my talk. And half the speakers referenced how inspired they were by the fact that I traveled halfway across the country by myself to give a talk at your event in Philadelphia. I mean, it was very hard to take in for a little while. And Azuka Zook, Erica Booker, um, uh, John Locke, I think was the other. There were several other speakers who mentioned me during their
Yeah,
talk. It was
Travis
it was
Wolf,
crazy. And
Amy J. Yeah,
yes, yeah, it was very, very, and it was very encouraging to me because um, a lot of times, and this isn't just for me, a lot of times people get so involved in the doing that they don't really take the time to realize, hey, I just did something that's pretty freaking amazing, and I need to remember this day or this week or this minute. And that happened to me in Philadelphia. I really did not think how big a deal it was until after the first week of my trip was almost over. Had done my talk and was sitting down when it really hit me. Max, most people would not have done what you just did.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when you got off the train, right? Which they missed. You were late because you missed getting off the train in Philly. You went all the way to Trenton, New Jersey, which is like Central Jersey,
Yeah.
and then came back, and then I couldn't get a hold of you, and I'm like, I don't know where he's at. I start leaving Hopeworks, where I was working at the time, because that's where you were planning on coming, meeting at. And then all of a sudden I get a call to like turn around and come back because you showed up, and it's like I was like sitting there thinking, like, man, that taxi driver must have thought you were crazy. A blind guy at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon wants to take a taxi to North Camden. It doesn't seem right.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, I knew because you told me before I left that Camden is considered one of the something like the
Most
third or
dangerous.
fourth most dangerous city in America.
Yeah.
Which don't any of y'all tell my
Unfortunately.
family that because they don't know that
Yeah,
yet.
they don't watch the show. Of course not. Why would they
They
watch
do
the
not.
show?
We do not want them knowing that either. Um,
Hopefully they can't hear you right now.
yeah, hopefully they can't. They probably can. I find half the time whenever I say stuff that I wish nobody heard, there's usually somebody listening at that point. So we will find out. But hey, I've taken 2 or 3 other trips since then, and I'm home right now. And thanks to Corona, nobody's worried about me leaving town anytime soon. But the real important part of this story, for the purposes of this interview, is I had reached out to Joe about being on his podcast in, I think, August of the year before. And as part of doing the podcast, I find out that he has the Mid Atlantic Podcasters Conference, but it was in and still is in September, although now it's the Independent Podcasters Conference, or Indie PodCon. And I kind of hinted at the fact that, well, if it wasn't for the timing, I'd love to speak there. So I didn't do that, obviously. But the next spring, when Joe decided to put on DreamCon, and this is where he and I are not sure, because he remembers me asking him if I could speak, and I remember him sending me an email and suggesting I apply. I'm not sure which is the truth, but we ended up. I got to speak at DreamCon because I had been on his podcast and because I asked him about speaking the year before. And sometimes that's the way it is with asking. Sometimes people either can't say yes, or they're involved in something at the time and they don't get back to you. And sometimes they say yes a year or 2 years later.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that being able to get over your fear of asking is huge. I think that it can be a game changer for you, especially if you're timid and not wanting to ask, not wanting to put people, feeling like you feel that burden of like, I'm going to put somebody out, and that's not what I want to do. And ultimately, if you don't ask, then you probably won't get what you're looking for in most cases, because
Right.
people can't read your mind. So,
No,
like, sorry,
no,
that's not a thing.
no. Now they can't read your mind, but I do believe that there are various ways of asking. And of course, you can call somebody on the phone, send them an email, post on their social media wall. You can leave a comment on their blog or the podcast. Those are obvious direct ways. But sometimes saying something out loud without asking, either in a comment or in an interview, will result in somebody saying yes. Sometimes just continuing to do something that frustrates you, but continuing to think about, well, it would be great if somebody would come along and do this or explain it, or show me a different option. And sometimes, that's into the whole law of attraction area, where the fact that you are focusing on it will eventually have somebody come forth that will help you with it. And then sometimes it's just a matter of being honest and sincere about the desire to be better at what you're doing. And when people know that you, at your heart, want to be really good at something, they will sometimes come along and offer to help you. And one of the best examples that I have recently is our good friend Stacy Greenberg.
What's up, Stacey? I actually was thinking about her today.
Yeah,
text her.
Yeah,
I should text her right now.
There you go.
Wait, I should.
Well,
wait.
You text her while I tell my story. Okay, we'll do both.
All right.
Well, between us, we will multitask.
I think her phone broke though, so I
but here's the thing: Stacy knew, or at least she believed, that I wanted to be a really good podcaster. And at MapCon last fall, she came up to me and she said, "Max, has anybody ever asked you about the camera angle you use? And the fact that the way you're recording your videos now, the camera is looking up at you. We are looking up your nose, and sometimes we even see nose hair there. It's distracting. It's making people not focus as much on your message or your guest message as they would. And I think that if you could find some way to add another camera angle, that would really help your downloads, and it would make your whole video presentation better." And she said, "I hope it's okay to tell you that." And to which I said, "I wish somebody had told me that 5 years ago, because I'd been asking guests and show hosts for 5 years, hey, do I look good? Am I in focus? Is the lighting okay?" I always ask that because I got no way of knowing if the other person on the other side doesn't tell me. So, and then, after we did that, and I recorded a few episodes with the new camera, she sent me an email and she goes, "Max, you really need to improve. It would make it even better if you could add an additional light source." And she said, "Because right now you have the halo effect where you've got the only light you have is behind you. It makes you look like you have a disconnected head." And but hey, Stacy is an interior designer by trade. And so when you do that for a living for 30 plus years, it gets into your mindset where stuff like that bothers you. It physically hurts you to look at stuff like that. And thankfully for me, I have a good friend like her who said, and so, she and another friend in the group helped me pick out a light. And then my nephew set it up, but she reviewed it for me and said, that looks pretty good, unless you're going to add a third light source, which I really have no interest in doing. But, it is so much better. And that wouldn't have happened except for the fact that I have, people know that I really want to do as good work as I can, given my abilities and the location I have to work with. That happens sometimes, but usually you do have to ask. And sometimes it's easy, because if there's a submission form or an email address or a contact form, I love those, because I don't have to talk to nobody. I don't have to, you just fill out the form and press send and forget about it. And quite often with forms like that, I have submitted myself to things that I really wasn't qualified for at the time, but it didn't cost me no money. I thought, hey, it'd be great if they said yes. And of course, the perfect example of that is when I won the Amtrak Writers in Residence award, and and got them to pay me to go to New York City for the Christmas and New Year's holidays in 2016, 2017. I actually wrote on their blog announcing the contest that based on that I had to stop reading the profiles of previous winners because I was starting to talk myself into not applying. Because I could, I looked at these people, some of them had produced films, they had award-winning plays, they had multiple best-selling books, and I started to talk myself out of it, but I said, no, Max, just close this page, go over to their forum. I copied and pasted the first 3 chapters of my first book because they wanted a long writing sample. I sent it off, and I forgot about it, and 9 months later, they called me up on the phone from an unknown number at 9 o'clock at night and tell me I won. But I had no business applying. I actually remember thinking to myself or humming to myself that song from Sesame Street, like, which one of these is not like the others?
Well, so Max, oh man, where was I going with this? I had a story about asking and how it was about feedback, right? So I ask with a lot of the icon or MapCon at the time, I asked for feedback, and I would ask like, hey, if you have feedback, I would love for you to include your name and your email address so I can get in contact with you and you know hash out some more of like why you liked it or why you didn't like it. And there was somebody who pushed back on that, was like, I've never filled out a feedback form where I had to put in my name. That's horrific and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, this is crazy. Like this is really bad. So I reached out to her and said, hey, look, I'd love to learn more about what went wrong and why you had a bad experience. And afterwards she thanked me and said, people don't usually want to know like in depth what went wrong or why that was the case. And I was like, well, how am I ever supposed to get better if I don't ask the right questions and then have a conversation so that I could really see your point of view on it? Because all I have is people in my ear saying how great and amazing the event was. Like, well, that's awesome, and I'm super thankful for that, but there's got to be something that I could do that would help get it to help get it to the next level. So
I love forms like that because I've figured something out about them. You know how on those forms they ask you for your first and your last name. I now use my first name. The first name blank is I now put in the Blind Blogger, and then the second name blank I put in Maxwell Ivey, and it's just another way for me to give to reference my brand and to let them know before they even start reading my comment or my email, wait a minute, this is the Blind Blogger. And there's still a lot of people out there who find out about me and don't believe I exist or wonder how it's possible, even though there are many other visually impaired bloggers or podcasters. Last year at PodFest, I asked Chris Krementzis, I said, you think we could make an effort next year to have some other visually impaired podcasters here? Because I know there's a bunch of them. And this year at PodFest, Katie Krementzis, I was having fun with her. I said, well, Katie, I asked y'all for more blind podcasters this year. We have one more. And Katie said, yeah, but we improved by 100%.
No, so Brent Basher says it's tough with feedback because often people don't want to hurt feelings. It's really valuable, though, when you can get honest input. 110% agree there. People don't want to hurt feelings. I know I don't like I couldn't be one of those judges on like one of those TV shows and be like, that was terrible, you need to quit. Like that, I couldn't do that, right? Because like I'm always looking for the positive. I'm always looking for like, okay, here's like the one thing. Let's hone in on the one thing, get better at that, and then other things will start to fall in place for you. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Max?
Well, I think that most of those shows, they generally have a panel of 3 to 5 judges, and they always have 2 or 3 people on the panel who all they're there for is to look at the positives. So, you couldn't be Simon Cowell, but you could be Posh Spice.
Oh, no, it was Scary Spice, and
It was
I
okay.
forget what her actual name is, but yeah, no, but the problem with those people is they love everything. Just like Howie Mandel gets paid a ton of money to just like, I love it, it's amazing, like every single thing.
Yeah, I used
I
to
couldn't be
feel
that
for
person either.
I used to feel for Ed McMahon because there's no telling how many bad jokes he laughed at over the years to have his job with Johnny Carson.
Oh, Mel B. Brent says, yeah. Actually, she is pretty critical. So I maybe I could be Mel B. I don't have the looks, but or the
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
But
Okay. All right. But before I get totally sidetracked, I want to share the most important thing I've learned about asking for things, whether it's asking for help or opportunities. And I generally share this in a lot of podcasts and interviews is this. If you refuse to ask, you rob the other person of the joy they would have received from helping you. And I find that if I can get people to focus on the other person and stop thinking so much about themselves, about how they will look if they have to ask for help. Maybe people are afraid they'll come off as being egotistical if they ask for the opportunity to be on a podcast or a TV show. And of course, a lot of people feel weak, embarrassed, less than what they think they should be if they have to ask for help. But if you think about it from the other person's point of view, that they have opportunities and they're looking for the ideal person to fill them, or they have years of time put into learning a skill, acquiring knowledge, building up experience. And the best thing you can do for their day to make them feel better is to come along and go, I know you know this stuff. I'm really struggling. Would you please help me? And so that's why I always like to try to share that one thing is if you don't ask, you rob the other person of their joy. And I've heard other people say, if you don't ask, you rob the other person of their blessing.
I'd agree. Michael Wolf says, "What's up?" Well, first off, what's up, Michael Wolf? He says it all boils down to effective communication: 80% listening, 20% response, and I would definitely agree. If you're not listening and you're only looking to figure out what's my response gonna be to this, and to go along with that, don't be afraid to take a pause, right? Because you don't have to be like, oh, the person closed their mouth for like a split second. I have to pounce right now. You don't have to be that way. You can take a pause, then collect the thoughts and go. You don't have to be like,
Yeah. And I recently heard of a podcaster give a talk just on that subject about the.
Oh no! You muted your mic, Max. Oh no! You muted your mic. Oh, there you go.
I was trying to tell my computer to stop talking to me. I hit the wrong button. But it was what gave a talk about the power of a pause when it comes to having a conversation. Of course, she was talking about it in the frame of being a podcast interviewer. But you're right. We don't have to fill every pause. We don't. And I personally think that when it comes to effective listening, that I have an advantage in that I depend so much on the verbal communication, on the information that comes in from people speaking to me or from devices speaking to me. And the other thing is I learned a long time ago that I do not multitask well. I have to be in the moment, focused on the conversation, thinking about the other person and really listening to what they have to say and trying to put myself in their position as to not only what they're saying, but why are they saying it, trying to understand their point of view as well as their position in life at this time. And I think that does play into effective listening. It's not just, really paying attention to what they say, but trying to put yourself in their place and really understand what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, that also comes back to having empathy, right? And I love your branded cup, by the way.
Well, it's funny that you mention it. It's one of only two because the company that made them for me has gone out of business.
Oh,
so I've got to find a new vendor, and I'm really disappointed because the company I was using, they had a very simple ordering process for for people to order the wholesale or to buy them and have them sent to people. It was very screen reader accessible, friendly, and they also had some very good people in their customer service thing. But they closed down on April 2nd, so I've got to find a new provider for cups and mugs.
That sucks.
Oh, yeah, it
They
does.
closed down for good. Like,
yeah, they went out of business. They went out of business on April 2nd.
That's terrible.
Yeah, it is. I know, and I like the cup. I really like the mug. Of course, they didn't offer the traveling mugs, which is what several of the people who saw the mug said they really would prefer to buy if they were going to buy a mug. So when I find my next provider, they'll have to do the travel mug and the water bottles and things like that. But as far as the branded mug goes, that right there is an example of where I asked asked by implication by putting it out online, and then also asked directly. I had been saying for a long time, I decided back in January last year that I wanted to be much more serious about my podcast, and several people who know told me I needed to have a new professional logo, and I started putting out into the world that I needed somebody to help me design the logo, and didn't get any responses on it. But back in, what was it, March or April, I was interviewing Sandra Henry for my podcast, Heartfelt Keepsakes for You, Sandra. And I was doing a pre-interview before I had her on my show, and we got to talking about it, and I mentioned that I had somebody who I paid, but they didn't provide the artwork. And then she said, well, let me see if I can come up with something for you. And since you've had this bad experience, you won't have to pay me for it unless you love it or unless your community loves it. And then 30 minutes later, she sends me a text message saying she has the idea. And we worked together and created the artwork. And then so the What's Your Excuse, the whole idea of the guy with the cape and the superhero motif, that's all her design. And that came from, putting it out there that this is something I wanted and needed and didn't know how I would accomplish it. And I was surprised that people who do it for a living didn't, show up and go, well, what kind of budget do you have? But instead I meet Sandra, and I ended up having her on my podcast. And she had a great interview with her after she also, did an interview with you on the video. So it was, it was a good example of not directly asking, but putting it out there in the world that I needed something that I wasn't able to do that would definitely help my business. And now, as you say, we have a brand, the What's Your Excuse brand, the What's Your Excuse show. We don't have a What's Your Excuse website because those are all taken, and the really good ones would cost lots and lots and lots of money. But it was just one of those things. I had been wanting it and asking for it, and nobody came up. But then eventually, I'm having a conversation with somebody, really listening to them, getting to know them, building a relationship, mainly just for the podcast, and I end up with not one but two awesome logos because she also did this where I'm wearing a suit.
Yeah, the one that's on, I'm showing them right now on the screen share, Max, is the one where you're just in the suit with the cane. I think am I the one that I'm the one who pointed out the cane?
Yes, you are the one who said there had to be a cane. Yes.
Because I was like you have a cane with you a lot.
I don't use it much. I don't use it much, but I've always got it with me. Yes, exactly. I get grief from other blind people about my cane skills and my traveling skills, but I tell them I just have a different way of getting there. Which is another example. Think about this. I went to New York City in 2016. Okay.
Okay.
The only people I know there are the people I'm staying with because I was doing the Airbnb thing. But I traveled all over New York City, basically going from one person's shoulder to the next person's shoulder, just saying, hey, I'm going here. And eventually somebody would come up and go, well, sure, you can follow me. And, I did that several days. That was my pretty much primary way of getting to places. But that's not the way a lot of other visually impaired people do it, because most of them have more they have more vision than I do, or they have better cane skills, or they're just a little more adventurous. But I choose to think that by asking people to help me get from here to there, I get an opportunity to talk to people I wouldn't have ordinarily met.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It all falls into asking, right?
Yeah.
Now let me see here. So Brent Basham says what'syourexcuseshow.com is available, as well as what's your excuse.
When did it become available? Because it was for sale for $15,000 a month ago.
For the what'syourexcuseshow.com?
What'syourexcuseshow.com is available.
Yeah, maybe you're
I had somebody look.
what'syourexcuse.com, because that is unavailable.
Yeah,
maybe
okay.
if I go to like GoDaddy, maybe they'll they have a amount.
Well, I appreciate that, Brent.
$15,000 for what's your excuse?
That's what it was a month or so ago. The last time I looked, I didn't think about what your excuse show.
Oh my God, $29,888. Get the heck out of here! Yeah, you got to add the show or podcast. Brent says, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Oh God, that's
the best I had come up with. Hey, see, that's a perfect example of asking subliminally. We put it out there that the podcast name was taken, and somebody goes, "Well, that was taken," but how about So what's your excuse show.com is available, or what's your excuse podcast. I like what's your excuse show. My Twitter handle is WYE show, because what's your excuse is too many letters.
Yeah. Wait. What was it? YEshow.com.
Well,
that's available.
Yeah, but I only did that for my Twitter handle because I couldn't find because somebody already has what's your excuse on Twitter, and I couldn't. If I added more letters, I think that's like the maximum 15 letters already. What's is 5 and Y is 4 is 9. EXCUS. Yeah, that's 15 letters already. So
I typed in "What's Your Excuse" podcast, and there's another show called "What's Your Excuse," right?
Yes, I know there's several shows with that in the title. I have to tell people to put "What's Your Excuse" show, or to put "What's Your Excuse" with a question mark if they're searching for me.
Okay, so yeah,
here's the great thing. Here's the cool thing. Because I met Chip Edwards at MapCon 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I heard him talk, and I said, because I heard him talk, I said, "Hey, Chip, I want to find out more about this. Is it possible you would work some sort of a deal with me, because you'd be working with a blind guy?" And he gave me a pretty good deal. But we've been working together for almost 2 years now. He's a sponsor of the podcast because I just really appreciate what he does. But yeah, one of my followers sent me an email about 3 weeks ago and said, "Max, when I ask Alexa to play What's Your Excuse, she now won't play your podcast. She's playing somebody else's podcast." And I looked into it, and I asked Chip, and Chip said, "Okay, Max, here's what's happening. We did not file for the invocation for What's Your Excuse. We only filed for it for the blind blogger, because you didn't ask me to file for What's Your Excuse." So that was on me. But here's the thing. He said, since Alexa pulls from Spotify, if people have their Alexa enabled, they can say, "Play What's Your Excuse," and they will get whichever What's Your Excuse is rated higher by Spotify. But so what me and Chip did, or what Chip did after I asked him, he filed for the invocation name What's Your Excuse. So now, if you ask Alexa for it, or if you ask Google for it, you're going to get my podcast.
So I got to give a shout out to Chip Edwards too, because as of I think last week, you can now enable the Super Joe enable Super Joe Pardo on your ALEXA or OK GOGLE. And
I love how we all have to whisper it, man. I think that's funny.
And while you will not get my podcast yet, I'm working on some flash briefing stuff with him and all that. But I do have the name secured, Super Joe Pardo, so no one else can go and be Super Joe Pardo
Yeah.
on our Echoes and Google Homes.
Yeah. So that's really cool. But yeah, there is another.
But that
What's
goes
your
back to
excuse?
ask, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, and you
Ask,
have to be
ask, ask.
specific, and you have to ask for everything you want, and then sometimes you have to go. Is there other things available? Maybe I haven't asked for everything I need. So that's and that's what happened with the Alexa skill. And yes, since I record my podcast live, even though it isn't broadcast live, she has turned up on my show a couple of times. But I think it's fine for two reasons. One, it's authentic. It proves to people that I'm recording live. The other thing is it kind of makes people think, well, he's I can actually listen to his podcast by saying it. So I'm cool with it. It happens every once in a while. It happened with me and David Goldstein the other day. But yeah, that is cool. And the funny thing is like I said, Chip is a sponsor of the podcast. But last summer, I was exchanging emails with his wife, Pam, who's also an amazing creative woman. She does woodworking and just is a real artist from what I hear. And I was talking to her about, well, I need to start bringing in some more income on the podcast. And she was like, have you thought about asking people to sponsor the show? And I said, I've thought about it, and I've put it out there, but nobody ever goes for it. And she said, have you thought that maybe there are people who would like to sponsor your show, but they think that you probably would want a lot more money, and they're afraid to ask you because they're afraid of offending you or insulting you by offering what they can pay you at this time? And I said, no, I've never thought about that. She said, well, why don't you put it out there that you'd be willing to take on a sponsor for, X amount of money and just see what happens. So I put it out there, and 24 hours later, Pam wrote in and said they wanted to take the sponsorship. So I personally, so basically it was her way of asking for something that they were thinking about, and at the same time it helped me. But if I hadn't told her that, hey, I'm struggling, I need to bring in some more money, and as a result, I've got these great friends, they provide a wonderful service. Their sponsorship of this show is what's allowed me, for the most part, it's really helped out with the money to travel to MapCon, to PodFest, to another event in New Jersey back in January called Unblinded Sales Mastery. And, without them, without us having that conversation, me asking, and then later her asking, I would have had to say no to a lot of things over the last 15 months.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you ask, and that's how you ask, you shall receive. You put it out there in the universe, and the universe will provide. Maybe
My friend, my friend Chelsea yesterday said she said, Max, I wish I had your courage to ask people for stuff. She said, I just don't know how you do it. How you send emails to famous people and fill out applications. And I said, well, it's very simple. I spent over 15 years doing the bookings for a 7-ride carnival in the state of Texas. And at that time, most of our competitors had 15 or 20 or more rides. They all, even ones that had the same amount as we did, had more exciting rides than we did. And so I spent a lot of time being told no. And that's where the whole if you don't ask, they can't say yes comes from, because my dad would actually say that to me when I would get tired and frustrated of continually being told by no by events and by shopping center owners that they just didn't want us. And that's what he would tell me. I'd keep going. So because of all that time, I really just am not afraid of being told no. And I share that because I think a lot of people feel like, he got to be this fearless person overnight, or he's always been that way. But, growing up and for a lot of my life, I would have been considered an introvert. And yeah, I could send letters, back when people still wrote letters. That was easy. And calling people one-on-one, I could do that, but I had to psych myself up to do it. But after, like I say, years and years of doing an occupation that basically, if I didn't do it, we probably weren't going to eat, it has become something that's part of me. And I'm just not as scared of being told no. I mean, Matter of fact, I hope that if somebody's going to tell me no, I hope they call me on the phone so I get a chance to talk to them. And I don't mean, to get
Exactly.
angry with them. I just mean, if you're going to tell me no anyway, let's have a conversation. Let's hang out a while. And even if the answer is no, when we're through, you'll like me more. So, or I may understand you better. But I do, and I will honestly admit this, I do ask for a lot of things for me and for my friends and clients. I send out a lot of emails and fill out a lot of submission forms. And in fact, one of my good friends, Mara Sweeney, last month introduced me to a friend of hers on LinkedIn because I asked her to. And her introduction to this woman was, she said, I don't know what Max wants, but I know he wants something, and I know it'll be entertaining. That was her introduction to her friend on LinkedIn. I don't know what he wants, but I know he will ask you for something, and it will be entertaining. And that's
Well, it will. It always is entertaining with you, Max. That's one of the reasons I enjoy getting to talk to you so often. Um, so all right, so I need to break real quick here to talk about May 16th. We're doing the Community Building for Podcasters Conference. It's live, it's virtual, it's free, it's happening over at indiepodcon.com/virtual. You absolutely do not want to miss this. We have I think it's 12 speakers, plus we're raising money for a charity. It looks like as of right now that charity may be No Kid Hungry, as the voting is taking place inside of the IndiePod Con group. If you haven't joined that group and you're watching this outside of that group on Facebook somewhere, go and join us. It's indiepodcon.com/group. You can join us if you want to be a guest on this show, because like we have quite a few more weeks booked up here, week after week after week. In fact, next week we have Pete Turner coming on, and then Annette Bone, and then Eric Hunley makes his return to the show. And then,
unstructured podcast fame.
yeah, big fan of him and his show. He just had John McAfee on his show.
Wow.
Crazy old John McAfee was his guest on his show. We there's just so many guests. We're looking for more guests. For in June and July and August. So if you want to be a guest, if you're an independent podcaster, go to indiepodcon.com/guest. Pick a time on the calendar and fill out the 4 questions there, and I will see you be a guest here on the IndiePod podcast. Let's see. Updates about September 24th to the 26th here in Philadelphia. We're supposed to be having our live event. Earlier tonight, I sent out a survey in an email asking, a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to come to a live event? With 1 being no, let's do a virtual. And 10 being, I'm not going to miss it. Like, there's just no way. I mean, assuming that we're allowed to have it, I think that kind of went without saying. Assuming we're allowed to
Yes.
have it, and it's safe enough for us to have it, presumably. We go ahead and have an event. Well, the results so far are kind of split. Maybe a little more than I
Well,
kind of thought.
if you think about it, the entire Corona issue has become split, just like everything else in the country. So I'm not sure why you were surprised.
Because
We even
I
have
thought as podcasters,
yeah.
we were more sensitive to like this kind of stuff. Which look, there was a bunch of ones. So I'm going to throw this up on the screen and show. So, Max, I'll walk it through so you can see 46%. Was the 1. It should just be virtual. But if you look at from like a 5 to 10. It's let's see, nine people voted 10, 1 person voted 9, 4 people voted 8, 5 people voted 7, 0 for 6, 5 for 5. So if you took a 5 to 10, that's a pretty good clip of 18, 19 plus 5 is 24. So like 24 people of like almost half, right? Not I mean just under half.
Looks like you're about a third there. Although I hate to say it, I hate to point that out because I'm hoping you have the event.
Well, I don't want
I've
to not have the event, but I also don't want to have to self quarantine myself from my family for 2 weeks after the event either, right? So
yeah,
there's a very because like my son has like a asthmatic thing when he
right.
gets sick, so he has a nebulizer. But yeah, so like I'm still kind of up in the air, and I just thought like you know what, let me take a poll and see like because I kind of honestly, Max, I was expecting it to be much more ones, twos, and threes
You didn't
than
expect
like
all the zeros.
no, not zeros. No. Oh, there was no zeros.
Oh, okay.
But just I was not as many tens, ones, or tens, nines, eights, seven, six, and fives. You know, like I was expecting more. So you're right, probably right. It is probably closer to like a third of the people that have voted so far are in the camp of like, yeah, I would go if it's safe and expect, we're allowed to. Like
Yeah,
it's a thing.
yeah.
Michael, well, thank you so much, Indie Podcon Rocks. I like I might be a little biased. I'm not supposed to give my opinion, but I would say it probably does. Chip Edwards is in the house. What's up, Chip? Like that advice. If you don't ask, you already have the answer you are afraid of. Brent Basham says, and you're
Wow, I love
asking,
that.
yeah, right?
Thanks, Chip. That was awesome.
That was awesome. And Brent says, and you're asking why we still have no clue where this goes. Yeah, no, I know, I know, Brent. I'm trying to get I'm just trying to get a pulse. See, like, are people going to feel like they can go right, like that, like themselves, right? They would be willing to make that choice to go just because you can, you're allowed to legally or whatever, and you're free to go, doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to feel comfortable in going. And obviously I want everybody to be comfortable. I would love to have the event. I think there's still a potential for us to have the event. I'm not canceling it. I just wanted to get a pulse to see where we're at. And maybe in another 4 weeks, 5 weeks, I'll send another poll out and ask like where people are at, where we're looking at, I mean, people vote with their dollars, right? And full disclosure, ticket sales have not been lighting up the world at all. So,
Yeah,
I
but
just
yeah,
trying
but,
to
yeah,
gauge where I'm supposed to be
yeah.
in
But
this decision making.
but I'd like to throw out a couple of things here. One, by being what'd you say,
Fourth to the
September
26th.
24th. You're for the Philadelphia area. You're at the beginning of winter, and there are going to be people who are concerned that as we go back into the cold weather season, that this thing is going to come back as bad or even worse, and that could have played in. I wonder if the results would have been different if you were asking about holding Indie Podcom in August as opposed to almost October.
Well, Max, actually, that fall starts September 22nd, so it's 2 days after fall starts. So technically, I mean, not technically, but it's basically still quote unquote summer. And up here, it's still pretty warm in September, depending on how things go. But
Yeah,
no, I agree with this. I agree with the sentiment that like, hey, we might be rolling into a pretty rough time, part two,
yeah.
in this
Well,
country.
yeah, and I'm one of many people who said this at Podfest that if we hadn't already bought tickets and already most of us already been there on March 6th, I think the turnout wouldn't have been anywhere close to 15 or 1800 or 2000 or whatever it was. But by the time things started to get really serious, most people were either already there or had already spent their money and been told they wouldn't be able to get a refund from the airport or the hotels. So I think that if Podfest had been a week later, it wouldn't have had many people on the floor either.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, and I mean, Chris knows that. He was concerned. He was as concerned as I was concerned about going and
Yeah,
bringing my family behind me, and then going to Disney World. Like it was not fun. Terry Walters,
I'm
based on
sure it
what
was
I'm
very
hearing,
stressful.
live events are going to get a pretty slow startup. Joe, I think people are still afraid to commit. Love live events, but difficult to commit. I totally understand. Look, like I just said about Podfest, like I was real close. Like I was dragging my feet going to the airport because I was just like, like I'm okay. Like would have been okay if somebody had been like, hey, we're canceling flights, like we're shutting down movement and stuff like that, like like within a week's notice.
Yeah.
I was like legit nervous, and didn't want to go. So I'm glad I went. In hindsight, everything turned out
Yeah, it was
fine.
last big
Thankfully,
part,
like
last big party, last big networking event for a while. So I'm glad I went too, and
yeah,
I'm sure Chris was very concerned because he's just that kind of person. But as far as public events, I haven't heard back yet. But while WordCamp in Houston was canceled or was at least postponed until September, they're still holding their options open. WordCamp USA is supposed to be in Missouri the first week of September, and they haven't replied to my submission to speak yet, but they haven't sent me a letter saying that they're canceling their event. So some people are still going ahead and going through the process because they really don't know where we're going to be a month, 2 months, 3 months from now. But if they wait until we know for sure, then they're in a more difficult position as an event organizer than if they go ahead and try to plan things now. And
yeah,
I will be the first to admit that if as much pushback as I had leaving here to go to Orlando before the corona got serious, I think there's going to have to be a lot more improvement than we have so far for my family to feel comfortable with me going, even if I feel comfortable with it. And since I don't drive, usually it does come down to convincing the rest of them. So we'll see.
Well, it is difficult, but to go along with the theme of tonight, right? If I don't ask, if I don't put it out there and just get an idea of like what are people thinking, is it overwhelmingly in one way or the other? Then how am I supposed to know how to steer the boat?
So let's look at it from the other point of view. How are the virtual summits doing as far as attendance? Is the audience growing? I know the Facebook community is growing every time you do one, and
yes.
So
I mean that's growing every day, period. But yes.
So it may be that there's no real need for you to even have to do a live. I know you enjoy doing them, and we all enjoy being able to see each other face to face. But so it may be the case that doing a live event is not something you need to do as part of your business model or part of your branding in order to keep moving forward as Super Joe Pardo.
Well, no, absolutely. Ideally, I would love to still do the live event, but if people feel that way now, I think this is pretty telling. Chip Edwards said WordCamp US went virtual, so I guess that's your answer there.
Yeah, that must have happened recently because I haven't gotten an email from them. But many of them canceled. But Chip should know he does more WordCamp talks than anybody I know. He has really been out there spreading the word about voice branding and protecting your name online through Alexa and Google. He's really been working hard at it. I'm very, very impressed by it.
Yeah. So all right. So anyway, we're getting close to wrapping up time. Max, do you have any last thoughts, any last stories that you'd like to share about asking that might inspire people to get up the nerve and ask?
Well, let's see. I think I've told most of my really good stories. Asking people. It's rare somebody asks me a question I don't already have the answer for.
It was just the.
I mean, I've done over 250 podcasts, and I mean, you would think at this point. Oh yeah, I got a good story. This happened just recently. I'm surprised often by when people put out that they have an opportunity available, that hardly anybody will take them up on it. I know some of that is skepticism. There's a lot of maybe not fear, but apprehension in the online world. But recently, in a Facebook group that I feel pretty comfortable in, from Mark Mawhinney, the Natural Born Coaches podcast host, somebody put it out there that they had a Roku channel that was looking for more content. And so I sent them my information. They checked out my podcast. They got on the phone when we had a conversation. They've since started syndicating the video from my YouTube channel. They're taking the video from there. They're editing it and then putting it up on Roku on Knob TV. But the reason I'm mentioning this is I asked them if they had a whole bunch of people, and they said no. Very few people had reached out to them, and they were disappointed because they are looking to add more content where it can be streamed on Roku and then eventually on Amazon. So sometimes it can be, there's an opportunity there, and taking advantage of it is really pretty simple. It's not all that difficult for you to do it, but part of you just thinks, it's too good to be true. Or they can't really want me. I'm just an average podcaster. I'm a good interviewer. My numbers aren't in the thousands of downloads or the millions of followers, but because I said, okay, I'll see what they're doing, what they're all about, and I'll share my content with them and see what they think. And as a result, they said yes. 2 or 3 of my episodes are already on Roku at Knob TV. And I've talked to a few friends in the last week who are like, wow, now I can actually, I'll be more likely to watch your podcast. So these are, and then of course, everybody knows how everybody knows how I accidentally interviewed John Lee Dumas, because I said, hey, I don't think that you would be a good fit for my podcast because it doesn't look like you've ever struggled before. And he replied, telling me, has any of your guests ever went to combat and lost 4 of their friends in warfare? And I said, no, absolutely not. So, he ended up being on my podcast, but that's the point. You have to have the freedom to say stuff like that, to ask people questions that you probably figure the answer is no. I mean, if you look at most of his online work, it does not look like he's ever struggled. So basically, that was me being authentic and saying, this is how I see my podcast, and these are the types of guests I want on my podcast. And interesting thing about it is, of the last 10 interviews I've done, his has the lowest number of downloads of anybody else I've interviewed, even though it was a great interview. Yes. So basically, you have to overcome the fear of looking foolish. You have to overcome the fear of people of you thinking people will see you as less than you are, and you have to just go ahead and ask. I say if you don't ask, they can't say yes. I wish I could remember what Chip said, because that was brilliant.
I can bring it up. It's if you don't ask, you already have the answer you're afraid of.
Yes. So it comes down to fear. And I used to tell people that I was not courageous, brave, or fearless. But as I talk to people about asking for stuff, I realize I am just not worried about somebody telling me no. And it takes a lot of practice to get there. I'm not going to say, you're going to send 5 emails and you're going to be good. But it comes down to deciding that you're just not going to be afraid of what people think about you when you ask. And for the most part, people are going to think pretty well of you, because the truth of the matter is, most everybody that's a teacher was once a student. Most everybody that you're asking once had to ask themselves. Just because they've gotten to a point where it looks like they no longer need anybody's help doesn't mean they don't remember when they needed everybody's help.
I'm gonna ding the bell for that, because that is so true, and that's one of the reasons why, so many weeks I get to talk to you, Max, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity, for sure.
Well, I'm really grateful to the opportunity to know you and to call you friend and to have been part of your events and to have you be part of my story. And all facetiousness aside, the next book is out soon, and there are mentions of Joe Pardo in it. So,
no, I hope that's a good thing.
It'll be a good thing. And just as an aside, every once in a while, you are not. Every once in a while, there's a lesson you're not really ready for yet. When I first met Joe in person, he took me to dinner, and I was very reluctant to order what I wanted to eat. I was happy with what I chose, but I was afraid of infringing on his generosity. And a few weeks ago at Podfest, a nice couple that I met in the hallway, we talked a while. They asked me if I wanted to go to dinner with them. I said, sure. They asked me what I wanted to eat. I just said, hey, this is what I want. I want to drink a beer with my meal. And Joe comes up and he says, Max, it's amazing how much progress you've made in a couple of years, because when I first met you, you would have never done what you just did. So sometimes we just have to wait. Sometimes those lessons take a while before we're ready to accept them. And that's just one of the many things I've learned from you. So thank you.
Dude, I've learned so much from you, from patience to asking, to courageousness of being, living a life that, doesn't come easy in any sense of the matter. So I absolutely have learned so much from you, Max, and I'm so glad to be able to call you a friend and be able to talk to you so often on the phone. It's yeah, and to get to see you so many times in 3 years. How awesome is that? Like,
yeah. And I'm submitted to speak at Indie PodCon whenever the next one happens. So I'm looking forward to doing my Life as a River talk for y'all, and hopefully it'll be this year. But if not, it'll be 2021. If not this year.
Yes. Yeah. Well. Yeah. It absolutely will. There, without a doubt, there will be a 2021 event for Icon. So Max, I got two last asks for you.
Oh yeah.
First off, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, they can find me at theblindblogger.net. Or they can ask Alexa and Google to either play the Blind Blogger, or Google. You go ask for the Blind Blogger, and then what's your excuse? As we talked about that earlier, just tell either one of those ladies that you want to listen to What's Your Excuse, and she'll find it for you. I think it's hilarious that as podcasters we're afraid of saying her name.
Well,
and yes, Chip.
Creators,
yes. And yes, Chip, I know you explained to me the other day how to change her name, and I'm going to do it. Okay.
Well, it's funny. My tablet in front of me uses the AMAZON as the wake word, and I have a ALEXA behind me on top of the
so you basically don't have an option.
No, I don't actually. I need to change it off of. I'd use the word computer, but you can't change it for the. Well, at least last time I checked, you couldn't change it to the tablet. But yeah. Stacey Greenberg finally decided to join the conversation. I didn't know you guys were chatting tonight. You should have mentioned it. You're right. I should have mentioned it. I apologize, Stacey.
I'm sorry. I am nowhere
just beat me up, Stacey. It's all right. I can take it. I'll take it.
Man, I don't know that even Stacey would have hit you that hard. I mean,
you don't know Stacey well enough.
That, or I'm not sure you would have been standing by swing 10. I mean, not sure which way to go on that one.
She is a wonderful person, but she will knock you out.
Okay.
Oh, she's got a frowny face going. Oh, stop. Okay,
by the way, Stacey, we love you, and
yes.
If you get a chance to listen to it later, you come off very favorably. So.
You do. You absolutely do, Stacey.
And y'all can find her.
I would.
You can call her, and you can find her at interiorandDesignLLC.com.
Yes, you
I
absolutely
gotta
have
help out the lady that's trying to make me look good.
In fact, yeah, here's her website right here. I just pulled it up. Um, Edwards is laughing. All right, so my last question to you, sir, is my big ask is, can you sing us a song? And
Yep, and
Stacy
I'm
Greenberg loves us too. Thank you, Stacy.
all right. So, if we're worried about copyright, I can sing "Buckaroo" by Donna Jean Foster, a woman I met on the train to New York
I'm
City.
not
Who's
worried
good.
about copyright.
You're not worried about?
Just
Okay. All right.
yeah,
Okay.
it's a
Okay.
cover song. It's different than me just
Okay.
playing the
All right.
song.
Okay. As long as you're not worried, because I'm not worried about it, but about once every 3 months, somebody will ask me if I'm worried about it, and they'll tell me how much trouble I could get in. So, all righty. Hey, Garth, if you're listening, I want you on my podcast. You know, a dream is like a river, ever changing as it flows. And the dreamer's just a vessel that must follow where it goes, trying to learn from what's behind and never knowing what's in store makes each day a constant battle just to stay between the shore. And I will sail my vessel till the river runs dry, like a bird upon the wind. These waters are my sky. I'll never reach my destination if I never try. So I will sail my vessel till the river runs dry. Till the river runs dry.
Woo! Way to go, Max. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
Been fun.
Thank you. It has been fun. Everybody, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch tonight here on the Indie Pod, or listen wherever you are right now listening to the Indie Pod podcast, because our podcasting numbers are growing. Actually, for a while they were a little stagnant, but they have been growing over the last couple of months, and I am super appreciative of that. Next week we have Pete Turner. He was a spy. He was like a legit spy, and he's now turned podcaster. Super great guy. If you watch the social media marketing for, or social media promotion for podcasting conference, he was part of that. It was awesome having him in there, and it's gonna be a fun time next week. I know for sure. Um, Oh, let me see here. Our sponsor for this week, and if you'd like to sponsor this show, reach out to me at joe@superjoepardo.com. Shoot me an email. Just like Max, I'm asking. I'm gonna do the ask thing. If anybody wants to sponsor this show, it does get a couple hundred views, a couple hundred downloads. It's super targeted for independent podcasters. And if you would like to do that, again, send an email to joe@superjoepardo.com. This episode is brought to you by Podbean. Podbean is an easy and powerful way to start podcasting. They give you all the tools you need for a successful podcast, such as unlimited podcast hosting, podcast distribution, monetization options for podcasts of any size, and live stream podcasting capabilities. Sign up today at www.podbean.com. That's PODBEAN.com. I hope you all join us for Community Building for Podcasters Conference. It's live, it's free, it's virtual. It is May 16th. It's from 9 a.m. till Eastern Daylight Time until I think about 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We have 12 speakers, and we'll be raising money as well as playing some Minute to Win It games for charity. I'll be donating money, my own money, for anybody who can complete the challenge. So I'm going to be putting it out in the Indie Podcasters group. If you go to indiepodcon.com/group, you can join that said group, and you'll be able to jump in live on the Facebooks with probably, I don't know, anywhere between 30 and 60 people watching while you put a cookie on your forehead and try to get it to your mouth.
That was fun. We did that at DreamCon. That was fun.
Right? Yeah, it was fun. So we're going to be doing that. For every person that does that, I'll be donating money to the charity that we choose. Big shout out to everybody who was watching tonight. By the way, Lou, we missed you. Big shout out to Michael Kroos, Michael Wolf, Ant McGinley, Brent Basham, Stacy Greenberg. I don't know if I said Michael Wolf, Eric Patrick Thomas. Gonna hang out with that guy tomorrow night virtually. And of course, Chip Edwards, Stacy Greenberg, and of course you, Max. Thank you so much for being here.
A lot of fun. I appreciate it.
It is. The hour flew by. I don't know where the hour went. And I'm super grateful for the great feeling that I'm having right now. Everybody, I hope you all stay safe and stay, away from as many people as possible. If you know what I mean. I will see you all next week. And if you haven't heard this theme music started last week. I don't know if you love it, but shoot it in the comments. I'd love to get some feedback on it. I mean, it's no Max singing, but I wanted something a little like 8-bit and digital to go along with the show. Good night, everybody.